Okafor felt a chill run down his spine. How can this be? We buried you. You are no longer living, he said, stepping back slightly, his eyes wide with fear. I am a spirit, bound to this world, Anayo said, her voice tinged with sorrow. I need your help, Okafor. My child, my child must be born, but I cannot do it alone. Okafor's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to grasp what he was hearing. How can I help a spirit give birth? He said, his voice barely above a whisper.
Hidden Tales by Beckham.
In the peaceful village of Umueze, there lived a seamstress named Anayo. Anayo was a woman whose skill with her needle was admired far and wide. Her hands seemed to weave magic into every garment she crafted, and the villagers often said that anyone who wore her clothes was blessed. Anayo, tall and dark-skinned with deep, gentle eyes, always wore a smile that could light up even the darkest day. She was known for her generosity, giving half of her earnings to the care for the elderly and the poor. One day, while walking under the shade of palm tree, Anayo met a man named Ifeanyi. Ifeanyi was a tall, handsome trader from a neighboring village, with strong arms and a smile that made her heart flutter. The two fell in love quickly, their bond deep and genuine. Soon, Anayo found herself expecting a child. One fateful night, as the rain drummed softly on a thatched roof, Anayo lay down to rest, her body tired from her work and the early signs of pregnancy. The next morning, when the villagers came to greet her and find her stitching as usual, they were met with silence. Her door was locked and an eerie stillness hung in the air. Where is Anayo? Where is Anayo? Whispered Mama Ifechi, the village elder, her wrinkled face creased with concern. As the day wore on, the villagers grew more anxious. A strange odor began to waft from Anayo's small hut, and they knew something was wrong. They broke down the door, and there, lying lifeless on a mat, was Anayo. The village was plunged into mourning. No one knew she had been pregnant, and to make matters worse, Ifeanyi, the man who had promised her marriage, had vanished. As days turned into several weeks, and the villagers tried to move on from the sorrow of losing such a kind soul. But just when they thought peace had returned, strange rumors began to swell. Nnamdi, a palm wine tapper, returned from his weekly journey to the village of Obele with unsettling news. I saw her, he whispered to the men gathered at the market square. I saw Anayo alive. The men laughed at first, thinking Nnamdi was playing a trick. How can you say such a thing? Barked Okafor, the village hunter, his thick arms crossed over his chest. We buried her with our own hands. But Nnamdi insisted. I swear on my life, it was true. She was wearing white and she was pregnant. The news spread through Umueze like wildfire, and soon another hunter named Chinedu came forward with an even more shocking revelation. I saw her too, he said one evening around the fire. She was wandering deep in the forest, her belly swollen with child. She didn't speak, but her eyes looked lost. Fear gripped the villagers. Many believed Anayo's spirit was not at rest, and that something had happened to keep her soul bound to the earth. Weeks later, on a dark and stormy evening, Okafor the hunter, known for his bravery, set out into the forest. Okafor was tall, with skin hardened by years under the scorching sun. His eyes were sharp, and his spirit unshaken by tales of spirits or strange happenings. The forest was thick with mist, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels watching his every move. As Okafor moved deeper into the woods, his sense heightened. The forest buzzed with an airy energy, as if the trees themselves were whispering secrets. Suddenly, a soft rustling caught the air. He tightened his grip on his spear and moved cautiously towards the sound. From the mist, a figure emerged. A woman dressed in flowing white robes, her face veiled, partly covered, and her belly swollen with pregnancy. "Who are you? Who are you?" Okafor called, his voice steady but cautious. The figure stopped, her voice soft and otherworldly. "I am Anayo, but I am not of this world anymore." Okafor felt a chill run down his spine. "How can this be? We buried you. You are no longer living," he said, stepping back slightly, his eyes wide with fear. "I am a spirit, bound to this world," Anayo said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I need your help, Okafor. My child must be born, but I cannot do it alone." Okafor's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to grasp what he was hearing. How can I help a spirit? How can I help a spirit give birth? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Anayo stepped closer, her form shimmering in the dim light. "You must gather the items I need and return to this place at dusk. Only then can my spirit find peace, and my child can be brought into this world." Before Okafor could ask another question, the spirit of Anayo vanished into the mist, leaving him alone in the quiet forest. Okafor stood in the stillness of the forest, his mind racing. He had heard of spirits and restless souls, but never had imagined he would be taxed with such a burden. How can he help a woman who had passed on, and how can her unborn child still exist? Determined to uncover the mystery, Okafor returned to the village and sought out the wisest person he knew, Mama Ugochi, the village spiritualist. Mama Ugochi was a short, elderly woman with skin the color of mahogany and eyes that seemed to see beyond the world of the living. Her small hut sat on the edge of the village, surrounded by shams and herbs, a place where villagers came for healing, protection, and guidance. When Okafor arrived, he found Mama Ugochi seated on a mat, grinding some roots into powder. Without looking up, she spoke. "You have seen her, haven't you? The spirit of Anayo." Okafor shuddered, surprised by her words. "How did you know?" Mama Ugochi stopped grinding and looked up. Her eyes sharp. "The forest speaks. The spirit have been restless, and I have felt her presence for days now. Tell me everything." Okafor explained his encounter with Anayo's spirits and her strange request for help. Mama Ugochi listened carefully, her wrinkled face expressionless. When he was done, she nodded. "Anayo's spirit is bound by unfinished business. She was with child when she passed, and that child was never brought into this world. Her soul cannot rest until the child is born," Mama Ugochi said, her voice low and serious. "But how can a child be born from his spirit?" Okafor asked, confusion written across his face. But Mama Ugochi sighed and stood up, motioning for him to follow her inside. She rummaged through her shelves, pulling out ancient scrolls and charms. There is an old ritual, one that has not been performed in generations. It is dangerous, but it is the only way to help Anayo and bring a child into this world. Okafor felt a knot form in his stomach. What do I need to do? Mama Ugochi handed him a small clay jar and a bundle of herbs. He must return to the forest at dusk, to the very spot where he saw her. Place this herb on the ground and pour the contents of this jar over them. Anayo's spirit will appear. She will guide you from there. But remember this, the boundary between the living and the dead is thin. Once you begin, there is no turning back. Okafor swallowed hard, but he knew he had no choice. He couldn't leave Anayo's spirit to wander forever, and he felt a strange sense of duty to her unborn child. He thanked Mama Ugochi and left her hut, his heart heavy with the weight of the task ahead. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, Okafor made his way back to the forest. The air was thick with humidity, and the trees stood like silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. He reached the spot where he had first encountered Anayo and knelt down, spreading the herbs across the ground. With trembling hands, he opened the clay jar and poured its contents over the herbs. A strange, sweet smell filled the air, and the wind began to stir. Suddenly, the forest grew quiet, unnaturally quiet. Not a single bird chirped, and even the rustling of the leaves had stopped. Okafor's heart pounded in his chest as the soft light began to glow in the mist ahead. From that light, Anayo appeared, her form as beautiful and tragic as before. "You have returned," she said softly, her voice carrying a deep sorrow. "I have," Okafor replied, his voice steady despite the fear growing at him. Anayo floated closer, her pregnant belly still swollen with the life she carried. "The time has come," she whispered, "but before we begin, you must know, this ritual will change everything. The child I carry is not like any other. He is tied to both the world of the living and the dead. His birth will bring both blessing and dangers." Okafor hesitated for a moment, but then he nodded, "I am ready." Anayo smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. She raised her hands to the sky, and as she began to chant, the wind picked up, swirling around them like a storm. The trees swayed violently, and the ground beneath Okafor's feet trembled. Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed from the forest, and Okafor realized it wasn't coming from Anayo. It was the cry of a child. He looked down and saw, to his astonishment, that the white clothes on the ground had begun to rise, as if something was moving beneath it. Before he could react, a brilliant light erupted from Anayo's belly, blinding him. When the light faded, Anayo was gone. In her place lay a small baby boy wrapped in white clothes, his tiny eyes wide open and staring at Okafor. The baby was warm, alive, and impossibly real. Okafor's breath caught in his throat. The child's presence was both miraculous and terrifying. What kind of life could this baby, born of a spirit, have? And what would the villagers say when they saw him? He gently picked up the baby, cradling him in his arms. As he made his way back to the village, the weight of what had just happened settled over him like a heavy cloud. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feelings that this was only the beginning. The weight of the newborn in his arms, both real and otherworldly. His heart pounding his chest as the baby's steady breathing filled the silence. How could this child, born of a spirit, be so alive? The path back to the village felt longer than ever. His thoughts were a jumble of fear and confusion. He had seen things no man was meant to see, crossed into a world no living being should enter, and now he carried the product of that crossing, the child of both the living and the dead. As they approached the village, the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the hut. The night was unusually still, and Okafor seemed that something had changed, not just in him, but in the village itself. He reached his home and laid the baby down gently on a mat, wrapping him in the white cloth that had appeared with him in the forest. The baby stared at him, his eyes wide, dark and curious. There was something about those eyes, something deeper than a normal infant's gaze. They seemed to hold the weight of ancient knowledge, the mysteries of life and death. At first light, words spread that Okafor had returned from the forest with a child. Villagers gathered outside his hut, whispering and exchanging fearful glances. When Okafor finally stepped out with the baby in his arms, the crowd gasped in shock. It's true, he brought back a child from the spirit world, one of the women whispered, clutching her chest. Mama Ugochi appeared from the crowd, her wise eyes locking onto the child in Okafor's arms. She said nothing for a long moment, simply studying the infant. Finally she nodded, as if confirming something only she knew. This child is not like others, she said softly. He is of two worlds. His presence will bring change. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, only time will tell. All the days passed. Strange occurrences began to plague the village. Crops that had struggled to grow suddenly flourished. The village river, which had been dried up, now overflowed, bringing new life to the land. But there was a dark side as well. Animals were found dead, untouched by any predator, and some villagers claimed to hear the wails of a woman at night echoing through the forest. People began to avoid Okafor's hut, fearful of what the baby might bring. They whispered behind his back, calling the child a curse, a bad omen sent by the spirits. Yet no one dared to confront him directly. The baby, whom Okafor named Chijioke, grew quickly, too quickly. Within days, he looked like a child of several months. His body strong, his eyes sharp. One evening, Okafor sat with Chijioke by the river, lost in thoughts. The baby cooed softly, reaching for his father's hand. Okafor looked down at him, troubled. How could a child born with spirit belong in this world? What was his true purpose? Suddenly, the air around them grew cold. Okafor's breath itched as he felt a familiar presence. He turned and saw her, Anayo, standing at the edge of the river, her form shimmering in the moonlight. You have done well, Anayo said, her voice soft but filled with a sadness that lingered in the air. But this word was never meant for him. Okafor's throat tightened. What do you mean? He is my son. He belongs with me. Anayo shook her head slowly. He is neither fully of the living nor fully of the dead. He is caught between two worlds, just as I was. One day you have to make a choice no father should have to make. Okafor felt a lump rise in his throat. What choice? What must I do? Anayo's song began to fade, her voice echoing in the wind. This is for you to discover. But know this, his presence will bring both light and darkness. When the time comes, you will have to decide which path he must follow. With that, she disappeared, leaving Okafor alone with his thoughts and the weight of an uncertain future. He looked down at Chijioke, who was now staring intently at the spot where Anayo had stood, as if he too had felt her presence. Okafor's mind raced. What kind of life awaits his son? What did Anayo mean by a choice? Was Chijioke destined for greatness? Or was he a harbinger of something far darker? As he held his son close, the villagers' whispers echoed in his ears, whispers of fear, of curses, of blessings they did not understand. And as the moonlight shimmered on the surface of the river, a question lingered in the air, one that no one, not even the wisest among them, could answer. How could a child born of a death bring life?